As the country reels from 4 days of looting and public violence, there are some who are calling for stronger measures and even the declaration of a state of emergency. Former Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner Advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza joins me now to talk about this. Advocate, thank you very much for your patience. It's a liquid situation tonight. Let me just declare up front that we are expecting the Minister of Police to talk to one of our reporters. So if I do jump in, please bear with me tonight. It might be a little bit of a tough conversation, but let's have the conversation nonetheless. Why are you backing the call for the President to declare a state of emergency?
Well, we need to firstly understand what the conditions should be when a state of emergency is declared. Because you will appreciate that the framers of a post-apartheid democratic republic's constitution did anticipate that even in a constitutional democracy, there may be situations where constitutional rights may have to be suspended in the interest of restoring peace and order. So it's a judgment call. So when I put it out there, it was because on my observation from all the news media, including yours, Thabo, there was chaos. It appeared as though those jurisdictional facts that are in Section 37 of the Constitution were manifest here. It appeared for the last 4 days we are in a state of general insurrection. It appeared that we were in a state of complete disorder. It appeared that there was a public emergency. I mean, the looting were a manifestation of a country. I can't call it war, but just now your intro was introducing people who have decided to take up arms if necessary against the looters.
Yes. Advocate, I want to come back to that. Communities who feel they want to protect their properties against other community members. But back to Advocate Ntsebeza. Advocate Ntsebeza, as we wrap up our conversation, because of the time, I realize it's late, and of course you need to be doing some work. But just from what you're hearing from the Minister of Police, particularly around the question of community members rising up and protecting their own property, taking racial tones. He says he doesn't even want to even begin to talk about illegal guns that possibly could be out there. Are we at a danger of a popular revolt, and we are just playing this thing under and saying it's just looting, and we'll loot back all those things that were looted and loot you back?
That is why I was saying a declaration of a state of emergency in terms of our Constitution, Section 37, has got checks and balances that were put into that section in order to make sure that even those states of emergency have the tendency of encroaching upon the rights of individuals. In terms of Section 37 of the Constitution, the declaration of the state of emergency is necessary only to the extent that it will be used to restore peace and order. A court can always be approached for a determination as to whether there is a basis for a declaration of the state of emergency, whether there is a basis for its extension. And indeed, in terms of that very section, the rights that individuals have and the freedoms that they have, the so-called non-derogable rights. Now, what does that mean? It means that in a constitutional democracy, there are rights which are so important that even in a state of emergency, they cannot be limited or be suspended under any circumstances. even in a state of emergency. That is why the framers of the Constitution felt it was necessary to deal in Section 37 very extensively with what a state of emergency would entail. For instance, the right to equality, even in a state of emergency, should not be tampered with. Human dignity. In other words, if you get soldiers who get into the streets because the declaration of a state of emergency has eventuated, they should still deal with people with dignity. The right to life. Those who are implementing a declared state of emergency must respect the life of others. The mere fact that they are operating under a state of emergency and the regulations, the act promulgated in terms of that section 37, does not give them a right to take life. People will still be free from being tortured during a declared state of emergency. In other words, in a state of emergency, the rights are suspended in some ways, but some rights are so non-derogable, in other words, are so important that not even a state of emergency can violate them.
Yeah.
For instance, arrested and detained people and the accused persons, that section still says the arrested people still retain a number of the Section 35 rights to a fair trial. For instance, those who have been arrested, and we are hearing that there are about hundreds now who have been arrested, they will still have the right to remain silent, because that's a non-derogable right. They will still have the right to be taken to court as soon as possible. That's a non-derogable right. They will still have the right to be charged and have a public trial for a competent court. In other words, a number of the fair trial rights in Section 35 of the Constitution, about which there was a debate in the courts fairly recently, are so important that even in a state of emergency, they will not be touched, they will not be violated. So that's why I was saying, people must not think of a state of emergency that people knew before 1994. Because in those dark days of apartheid, a state of emergency was a situation where, after it had been declared, people had no rights whatsoever. You could be detained indefinitely without any trial. You lost, in fact, all your rights, except those that you could justify in a court of law when, for instance, you wanted to be released from detention. In a post-apartheid democratic South Africa, you retain all of your rights, or most of your rights, even in a state of emergency.
Advocate.
So that is why I was saying.
I understand, and we're going to have to leave it there for tonight. But thank you for outlining exactly what it means to be in a state of emergency in a democratic dispensation like we have here in South Africa. Former TRC Commissioner there, Dumisa Ntsebeza, Advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza, outlining for us what it means and why he supports a call for the President to declare a state of emergency.